we told you when we were doing the group interview, like we're working on our book about digital theater. And at first we were going to try to rush it out this year, but as things keep developing, you know this, things are changing.
I know.
It's
They
like,
are.
it's moving with the speed of life all of a sudden. Like as soon as we think like, oh, that's the most advanced we've ever gotten,
But also
something else.
then the world and the universe is going towards a certain direction. And like you both said, everything is catching up to something. So there's a lot of interesting things happening, you know. I'm also in awe. I'm like, oh, okay. So we all doing this. Okay, we're doing this. Yes.
One of the things we're not having a problem with, but one of the discussions we're having with the book is how digital theater is impacting and opening doors for Black creators, you know. And I've started calling it, and correct me, tell me what you think, a digital diaspora, where like now Black people can move in areas that maybe they weren't before in theater, and they're creating these new spaces for themselves. And they're not, you know, it's like Black creators are like, I will not wait for some white old guy to open the door for me. I'm going to kick this door in. And I just know what you thought.
No, definitely. But also for me is, and just, you know, talking from experience, that there are avenues that even as a Black theater practitioner who has both the academic and the, you know, the practicing element of it, that I wouldn't be able to link up with other guys from the diaspora. Like for the fact that I'm teaching African theater history in Stockholm and in, you know, in Brazil, in essence, I kind of feel like digital theater made it quicker for me to, that was my ultimate goal. I knew that one of my biggest dreams and mission was to share African narratives and somehow to bridge the gap between what Europe has always said theater is and what I know theater to be in an African Black context. And even in South Africa, what we consider mainstream theater versus what Black theater has always been over the years. Digital space somehow has made it easy for us because there are no gatekeepers and no censorship. And you are actually even more appealing to the global and vast market other than you would have been had it not been of the digital space. And most of us come from Black consciousness movement, which was inspired by, you know, Black movement in America, you know, because we didn't have a point of reference. And that influenced a lot of our protest theater, a lot of our music, a lot of our lifestyle, and even the negativity of gangsterism and everything else. But because we were denied a sense of ourselves as Africans, your language was taken. While most of the diaspora were uprooted and were shipped, we stayed. But within this staying, as Africans, as nomadic people, there were barricades, there were borders created between us. And you, for a second, you were separated from your cousin sister, your cousin brother, your uncles, your aunt, because somebody in a conference in Europe decided that I'll take this portion, Ricky takes this portion, Dana takes this portion. And they don't realize that some of our ancestors are on the other side of the border. So we couldn't move freely. And there's something about us as Black Africans that we need to remember, that when most of our own were taken and forced out or sold, even those who were left also were separated and segregated. And we lost so much, our languages, our music, our spiritual element, because we don't speak religion, we speak spirituality in Africa. And that's the basis and the ritualistic of our theater. The origin of African Black theater is rituals, and our rituals are connected to our ancestors, to our God. And the language that we speak to our God, the language that we speak to our ancestors, the language that connects us as human beings through music, through the talking drums of Nigeria, to the masks of Ivory Coast, to the face painting of Southern, native people in South Africa. All that is how we connected. The only language we knew was artistic expression. And there was always a performer, there was always an audience, and there was always a story that connected all of us,
Exactly. So much so. One of the things, I was part of a theater conference, and we were talking about different things. And one of the things we talked about is still to this day how Black audiences and almost anywhere in the world get very involved in story. Like, it's a connection. We talk back, we cheer louder, we're more involved. The joke in America is you're watching a horror movie and everybody screams, "Don't go in there!" And what I learned was that's actually part of African theater, is that it was so important to have that connection with the audience. The audience did talk back, they were involved in the story. They would be excited during the exciting parts, they would be sad during the sad parts. You emoted to connect to the theater. And learning that and regaining that history about myself, because like a lot of people talk about, European theater is very, like, it's so disrespectful to talk during a show. It's so disrespectful. I'm like, we're not talking on our phones. We're talking to the guy who just somebody. So
we're talking to each other. And I'm happy you brought that up, Dana, because even when I teach African theater history, the origins and orators, oral literature, is that thing that a Creole from East Africa, or a storyteller from Southern Africa, or a musician would not have achieved their ultimate goal if the audience is not responding immediately. From our nursery rhymes, the whole thing is call and respond. African theater is not silence. It's not, you can't mute it, right? And it comes in us because it's part of our DNA, right? Something in your body, and even if there's a lead dancer, all of us at some point we join into the dance, because the energy and the spirit calls you to the space to be part of a collective. And that's why most of us, we don't speak in I. I always say that in all African languages, there's no he or she, there's no I doesn't exist in our community. It's us, it's they, it's them, it's we. And that's part of our DNA. So we don't, this separation, this type, I'm like, no, because I grew up, and that's why every time I speak English, I mess up all these pronouns. I'm like, I just know we and us, and we are here, we're doing this. That's why even my company's village. I'm like, because I carry a whole village with me in storytelling, in what I create. And I also know that I cannot go forward without coming with a chorus. And that's why they say that even when you are a Black person, you should walk as if you've got 3,000 ancestors walking with you, because you're never alone.
Yes, I love it.
You're never alone. It doesn't make sense for you to claim that and it's sad because colonization and racism and prejudice has taught us the element of I, and I think that's what distinguishes us with a lot of our European people. The whole thing of individualism, it doesn't exist. When you have a wedding, everybody's welcome. When somebody dies, we all come. When a child is born, the whole village celebrates, like a table and the setting and everything. I'm thinking about how when I first wrote an essay about why I got into theater as a Black woman who didn't have representation in South Africa in the theater industry, very white and Black male dominated, is because every show that I went to, I couldn't find voices of Black women that spoke like the women I knew when we are at home at my grandmother's place. And I, for a very long time, I kept saying, there are stories that need to leave our kitchen tables that only one, like, you would know when this story is from a kitchen table, whether it was through my huge, big, loud aunts were talking and I'm listening. I'm like, oh, wow, that's a beautiful scene. or they are cooking, or they are. We all come in a like mesh box kind of house in my grandmother's house in Soweto, and it's winter time, and there's like a coal stove there, and we plaiting each other's hair. I was like, there are stories that need to leave our kitchen tables that we need to take to the mainstream. And the fact that I couldn't find them for so long, I knew I had these stories that I need to make sure they find a space and a voice in those spaces. And then what I love with the digital space, it's almost like it's taking us back to say, actually, they don't have to leave the kitchen. They can be witnessed in the very same heart and soul of where they exist, and yet reach a much more bigger audience, and a global audience. And I think for me, that's the beauty of when the digital theater space allows us to take theater to the people without uprooting a sense of where those stories are embedded. And I think that's powerful.
Theater for us, where like one of the things we're fighting here in America, I feel like with digital theater, is people think we're trying to kill Broadway. They think like, oh, if you like digital theater, you don't like Broadway. And it's like, no, we think the stage is still important. I think it will come back, but digital theater is just as important. It's a different medium altogether. I almost want to say it's the same art form, like you were saying, with painting and dance and theater all being part of the same art form, but it's also different in that it's not as an opposition to the stage. It is its own stage.
It's an addition, but also it's becoming its own genre. And I think we need to acknowledge that it's becoming its own genre. So this generation, our generation's responsibility, we have allowed theater to go beyond what it had been in the norm or traditional format without killing it. And funny enough, like I was saying, when Ricky was saying about the kitchen, it was like, but also we are connecting it to the source.
Yeah.
we take it, we're actually taking it back. The only difference now is that there's just the camera in front of you. And one of the obsessions that I've always had is documentation. The reason why we have so much of African theater history that has not been documented, it has no names, it has no claim, it's because it wasn't documented. And our generation's responsibility is to make sure that we archive, so that there's representation and there's also documentation.
So that once again, the gatekeepers are back and they're trying to hold the gate. And you can feel it. You can feel the gatekeeper.
But also because they probably know that there's money in it, right? That's what fuels and encourages gatekeepers. I mean, in South Africa, none of the artistic directors and older guys are into digital theater. It's almost similar with what you guys they are going through. Like they pretend like it doesn't exist. Like they literally like they don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
They don't want to see it or hear it. They don't want to experience it. No. It's almost as if we are killing the jewel of their income,
Yeah.
But I kid you not. And someone at some point, and I feel like the shift is sort of happening among certain of them, they are capitalizing and they've discovered the benefits and they've seen a loophole that they can actually make money out of digital theater. And what's going to happen is because they've got equipment, they've got resources, they've got space, they've got all these things that most of us independent theater makers don't have. They're going to fly with it.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm afraid of. I've said more than once that like digital theater's biggest sin, so to speak, and I'm using quotes here, is that it was created during a time where it was needed more than it was wanted. And I feel like it would have existed on its own, but this just sped up. This whole situation just sped everything up and made it appear sooner, which is great for those of us who want it around, but has been, problematic, I guess, for people who didn't know how to control it.
And I mean, the disadvantage of the digital theater space in the context of Africa, and in particular, I mean, South Africa is even probably more advanced than most of other, yes, Nigeria, Ghana, but I'm saying that we are two-faced kind of countries where you have the most privileged and they don't have.
Mhm.
And the only disadvantage of the digital media is for us is the internet connection and access. So accessibility versus representation, so there's a constant question that, our generation, we need to ask ourselves, especially here in the continent, to say, who's my target market? And also, I can write a brilliant and come up with a brilliant digital play, but who's going to see it? Because, mind you, the people that I want for them to be part of it and to witness it, they might not afford. The internet is one of the most expensive thing in Africa. Even in South Africa, it's every minute it's a cost. And not everybody has a smartphone, not everybody has a laptop, not everybody has electricity, let alone bathrooms. So there's also a sense of sadness, in the sense that when you create, you have to ask yourself, who am I creating for? As much as I'm representing the majority, and I'm inspired by stories that are not documented, or storytellers that have never seen a day in a classroom, classroom. It would, and I hope in the future that where digital theater must go is it could be accessible for those people to see themselves and what they have contributed into, and that we could also give credit to those people who were instigators of this format. Because the only thing I do as Napo is probably take those stories, breathe a digital life into them, but they don't probably know, because I'm in the city, they are in the countryside. And I don't say that my kids, both my boys, should be in the theater industry, but I want them, when they walk into a room, even if they are scientists or teachers, their voice should be heard and their presence should be felt. And for me, theater gives you that. Like, I don't know any other profession, so a sense of who you are, where you come from, so much that nobody can discredit that. It has become part of your DNA. So if somebody's requiring you to be silenced, if somebody wants to mute you, if somebody doesn't want to see you, you're going to create a space to be seen and to be heard, It's that thing that I've got this code where I say, like, I don't want a space around the table. I want the table to be built for me when I walk into spaces. And I'm teaching my boys to say, you build your own table. Like, don't try to squeeze next to people's tables, and you're not going to walk into a room and ask for a chair. If that chair is not given to you, it shouldn't be your life's journey and your life's mission to try to squeeze into people's tables. If you get into a space and they don't offer you a chair, bring your own table, and then create a chair for yourself and sit on that space, because everyone will be forced to join you on that table that is yours and has you in it, as opposed to you trying to fit into boxes that people are creating for you that were never meant for you, that are going to define you, that are going to look down at you, that are going to make you shrink, that are going to censor you.